recording. Okay, so uh, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Naylor, and I'm transmitting uh, through the mystery of Zoom from South Portland, Maine, and I'm the director of the Maine Enneagram Center for Transformation and Wellbeing. And I love doing these interviews because I always learn so much. I'm always so moved by people's stories. So really, my wish and hope is to, allow or inspire people to share their story and really come out with really good, usable information because it's personal and you've lived it. And Susan is certainly one of these beautiful, authentic people who has walked. She walks her talk, and so Susan, it's just great to have you here. And where are you calling from?
So I'm in Pennsylvania, about an hour north of Philadelphia.
Awesome, awesome. Well, just a pleasure to be with you. And so I wonder if you would maybe just start with talking about how you discovered the Enneagram and the impact it had, and then just sort of unpack things. And
Sure.
I often talk about that everybody seems to have their own labyrinth that they have to walk through that isn't preset, but the agony and the ecstasy of your sixth journey and whatever else you feel inspired to share.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so dominant type 6, um, I believe 7 wing. And interestingly enough, I also scored high when I first took the Enneagram as a 1 and a 2.
Mhm.
So dutiful, very dutiful.
Mhm.
And high self-preservation, high social, and my blind spot is sexual instinct.
Mhm. Okay.
So, how I learned about the Enneagram. So I'm an integral coach, and I was exposed to the Enneagram through my business partner, Carrie O'Brien, when we first decided to start our business, New Leadership Distinctions, and we took our training with New Ventures West. So Carrie had already been exposed to the Enneagram. I really had not. I didn't know anything about it, and so of course I took the Ready, and then was exposed more to it through my New Ventures West training. So that was my first introduction
Hmm.
into the Enneagram, and it's funny. I've taken so many different courses over the years, in addition to going through the certification with the Institute. But I recently heard Ross speaking, and him saying, a lot of sixes, they can't make their mind up whether or not they're a six. And he said, and that always makes me think, I bet you they're a six. I can't say that was my experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, I read about the 6, the 1, and the 2. I certainly could see a lot of the behaviors of the 1 and the 2 in myself at the time, but it was as if when I read the 6, my heart dropped like a pit in my stomach. I felt like somebody had taken off all my clothes. I was just like, how did they know all this about me?
Yeah.
So I was not happy. But I could not deny that my dominant type was a 6.
Yeah. Well, very very similar for me too. Same thing. So I wasn't jumping up for joy, that's for sure. So
Mm-mm.
so how did you progress with working with it or using it? What were the things that you began? If you see the whole sort of architecture of the six psychic structure, like what were some of the areas that were maybe troublesome for you or challenging?
Yeah, I tend to lean more towards counterphobic than phobic.
Mhm.
So, although I can exhibit some phobic behaviors, I absolutely identify with the counterphobic behaviors. And as part of going through New Ventures West, certainly my reflection, my self observation, self reflection, I could really see how my whole life had been about safety and security and responsibility,
Mm.
seeking safety and security and responsibility.
Mhm.
Um, Also looking outside of myself often
Mhm.
for that and for guidance.
Mhm. Mhm.
Uh, and and not really trusting myself. Yeah, I mean, I can be a little cynical with others, and I can see myself, are they really telling the truth? You know, what's their angle kind of thing. But most of the time, it's about, "W- I'm not really trusting myself. I'm either not sure that I can do this. I'm not sure that I'm good enough, that I can measure up. Um, and the interesting thing when I reflected and self observed is other people look at me and say, wow. And I look at myself and I go, you're not good enough. You haven't done this, you haven't done that. And if you haven't, then how can you be sure that everything's going to work out? How
Mhm.
can you be sure, Susan, that you're going to be safe? Like I was always looking for surety.
Mm.
And I can remember even as a little girl standing at the window in our dining room waiting for my mother to come home. Like, and not that she didn't work full time, but I can remember standing there with anxiety and worry
Mm. Mm.
that my mom was not going to come home, that things were not going to be okay.
Mm.
And I couldn't have been more than, I don't know, maybe 8, 9 years old.
Mhm.
So that constant worrying that something bad is, the other shoe's going to drop. There's some kind of impending doom,
Mm.
uh, and that I need to, uh, it's kind of like this vigilance. Like I need to make sure that I take care of whatever I can take care of to mitigate that.
Mm.
I need to be a good girl. I need to be a good student. I
Mhm.
need to, all these things that I need to live up to, but all in the pursuit of um, controlling my environment,
Mm.
making sure that all is going to work out okay and that I belong,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I'm supported. I'm supported
Mhm.
by those on the outside.
Mhm. So, so when you were a little girl, grade school, high school, how did your sickness manifest?
Well, I was I was very social. I made sure that I had a lot of friends.
Mm.
I also always reverted to maybe I did something wrong. If I didn't get the sense that things were going right,
Mhm.
it was always the thought was always, "Oh, I did something wrong. I need to fix that to make sure that I've got friends, to make sure that I've got the approval of my parents, to make sure that I've got the support and approval of my teachers." So there was always this constant running in my head. What did you do wrong? How can you fix it? So the story usually was not about them. Like I had this like little intuition. I can sense that something's not right.
Mhm.
And there was never the thought that, well, it usually doesn't have anything to do with you, Susan. There was never that thought. The thought was it was always about me. It was always
Mm,
my fault.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that manifested in one, me being very dutiful, and two, me not taking a lot of risks.
Mhm, mhm,
Except all of a sudden, I would be the one that would go, okay, yeah, I'm going to be in the gymnastics show. Well, really? Well, what I didn't really understand was I did that to prove that I wasn't afraid.
mm,
When really inside, I was terrified,
mm,
absolutely terrified.
mm.
And after I did whatever I did, I didn't feel any less afraid or any more safe or any more secure, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I I
Mm,
I think, that was my probably my college years too. Although in college, I think I began to develop some um, leadership skills
mhm,
more so than when I was in high school. And like I started an organization in college, and I was president of this organization. It happened to be a sorority, and at the time, I went to an um, primarily it was all men prior to me joining college, me
mhm,
enrolling,
mhm,
Lafayette, and I started a sorority there.
mm.
There weren't sororities, so there were these makings of me stepping out.
Yeah.
However, I have to say that when I stepped out, I didn't usually step out alone.
Mm,
I always had a partner.
mhm, mhm,
And I find that really interesting.
mm. It's sort of,
To step out alone, um, I can't say that I really did that until my divorce in 2012. So I was in my 50s.
mhm,
And then I had a very, very serious illness in 2015. But all those years, there was there was always a backup person
mhm,
or a partner.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So, uh, so what comes to mind, is, you know, there's something in the sixth that's sort of a pathfinder energy, and also that part that collaborates at the same time they're pathfinding. So it sounds like there's something in that realm was occurring, and but it's interesting also, you know, when Russ would talk about Type Six, he always talks about Samwise Gamgee and Frodo, and Samwise carrying him, to the very end, and through thick and thin and thick and thin, and just like once he committed, he was all in. And I've noticed with sixes in my life, when they make a commitment, man, you're gonna have to drag them away from it, because when they're all in, they're all in. It's like their whole psyche goes into it, and so it's, when you mention, going through a serious illness, it's like, I think for myself as a type four, what's the worst thing I could go through is being seen as insignificant or defective, and then of course having a life changing experience like that, where that's what rained down on me for quite a number of years. My basic fear was just totally activated, and then you think about your illness, that sense of not having control, like, the earth opening up and you're dropping through. Like, maybe, would you be up for talking a little bit about how you?
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah, before I even talk about that, I also want to talk about my divorce because, um, in one year, in that year, I got divorced. I was in New Ventures West, so I was changing careers.
Hmm,
I got divorced and I built a house. So, um, it took me a really long time to let go of my marriage. And look, there's lots of reasons for that, but the reason I'm bringing it up is that commitment that I'm, I'm fully in, and I'm, you get it all. Uh, Man, I lasted a long time with that.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then one day, and I know Russ talks about this too, one day it was like a light switch got flipped.
Mm.
And I didn't do this in a healthy six way. When I reflect back on it, it was like the light switch got flipped, and all my problems were because of him. So I went into that projection mode
Mhm. Blaming.
that sixes go into.
Mhm.
I mean, I certainly didn't realize it at the time, but when I reflect back on it, it was really, I'm certainly, I've learned, and I regret some of it.
Mhm.
I really do regret some of it.
Mhm.
It's super difficult. And then I have to say that, Russ also says when the going gets tough, that sixes rise to the occasion, and they find like the strength in their arms and the courage of their shoulders is far more than they could have ever imagined.
Mhm.
And I have to say that year, I kicked butt,
Mhm.
and I had no idea. My greatest fear was that I wasn't going to be able to survive, and I did more than survive when I got to the other side of it.
Mm. Mm.
I was so freed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like maybe that sort of blame thing you went through helped you separate from a situation that wasn't serving you, at least for a period of time. Uh,
Yeah, but sixes can get very passive aggressive,
mhm. Mhm.
and they were passive aggressive times.
Yep. Yep.
Versus like, well, I'm going to say like an eight would be like, okay, we're done. And it very, very difficult
Mm.
for me.
Yeah.
Very difficult for me. That's just not the way my personality rolls.
Mhm.
Like to say we're done with somebody, I, I probably can count on one hand the number of times I've said that to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? It could be that they certainly deserve to hear that as far as my own well-being. But what stops me most of the time is fear.
Mm.
One, of conflict, and two, of losing support.
Yeah. So all that kind of fear pattern of the six, gonna
Absolutely.
lose support here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well.
so I just wanted to make a point about that. And in terms of my illness, it's just so interesting because I thought to myself, wow, you went through the fire when I that year. No, they talk about life changes. I had three of them, right, like in one year.
Mm.
And I remember thinking to myself, that's my test, I made it through. This was major, and
Mm.
you really showed yourself, Susan, that you know that you can rely on yourself and your own guidance. And but clearly God, the universe, whoever you want to say, did not believe that I had walked over the coals enough. And so in 2015, um, I started to lose function in my legs out of the blue.
Mm.
And in a period of 2 days, I lost everything from all function from my breastbone to my toes. And I was diagnosed with a tumor on my spinal cord
Wow.
up at T6, which is the thoracic area of the spine. And it was a tumor that was leaking blood and putting pressure on the nerves on my spinal cord and actually took away all of my functions from my breastbone to my toes. So I went from going to the ER, them coming in and telling me I had a mass on my spinal cord, to ambulance up to the main hospital, to many MRIs of my brain and my spinal cord, having to make a decision whether or not I was going to stay at the hospital and have surgery, because there was no question that the mass had to be removed from my cord. I was in surgery 2 days later to have the mass removed from my spinal cord, with no assurance of whether or not I would get any function back. So I have to say that now this could be, it could be that I was in shock, but I didn't really ask anybody else in my life what they thought about whether I should stay at that hospital or go to a teaching hospital or anything like that. I listened to my doctors. I I had 2 doctors. I had one that was the neurosurgeon that removed the mass from the cord, and the other one was the orthopedic surgeon who took the vertebrae apart. And I felt like I was dealing with Tigger and Eeyore, right? One had eyes of life, the other one just saw the glass half empty. Now, who do you think I asked for advice from?
The half empty guy.
You got it, man. You got it. I remember him coming in and him saying to me, they wouldn't tell me anything. They wouldn't give me any idea of whether or not I would be okay. None.
Wow.
And I remember him saying to me, this is going to be a long, hard journey. And I don't know, the 8 came out in me and I'm like, yeah, let's get this over with and get me on the other side so I can start working. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, you have a choice. You can stay here, you can go to Jeff, you can go to Penn, they're teaching hospitals. You need to make a decision. He left. Whoever was in the room with me, about a minute went by and I said, go get him again. He came back in, Dr. Molding was his name. And I looked him in the eye. And the reason I asked him is because he sees the glass half empty, right? And I said to him, if I was your wife, I said, would you tell me to stay here? And he said, yes, I would absolutely tell you to stay here and have the surgery done with Dr. O'Rourke. And I said, done. Wow. And I know that most people in my life didn't think that I should be at that hospital. They thought that I should have gone to a teaching hospital. But boom, that was it. I made my decision and nobody was going to change my mind. Wow. So the surgery, I came out fine from the surgery. I emerged from the surgery a paraplegic. Amazing. So I couldn't sit up, turn over in bed. I had no ability to move my legs. I couldn't do anything. Nothing. I lost my bladder. I lost my bowel. I lost everything. I could move my arms. I could feed myself. That was it. And nobody could give me any idea of whether or not I would not even recover fully, if I would be out of a wheelchair. So in less than 4 days, I went from being like totally in great shape to having to slide from the bed on a board eventually to get myself into a wheelchair to get around.
What a shock.
And I spent 3 months in an inpatient rehabilitation hospital. And I left there with a wheelchair and a walker. So Did I worry? I didn't worry. I I was just like, bring on the next day. Now, this could be, this is probably the bravado in me, not true essence strength, but the strength that comes from somewhere within that says you're going to survive, and
Yeah.
you're going to work hard to survive. I didn't think about the next day. I just thought about the moment and what I had to do.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I I was on so many meds. They put me on an antidepressant, of course, which I wholeheartedly accepted, because I was so traumatized. Um, I was terrified to come home. Terrified. I mean, it was like I found my place there where they could take care of me. And how most people want to come home from the hospital? I was so scared to come home because I didn't know if I could do it. And of course, I needed my daughter. My daughter changed her working situation. I needed my daughter to be with me. I had my now current husband there with me at night. My son was there to assist. I couldn't be left alone. Um, when I got home and everything started to sink in, I have to tell you how many, I can't even begin to tell you how many times I wanted to die.
Yeah.
I truly wanted to die. Not just because I couldn't walk, because I was in so much pain. And I don't know where that strength came from. So there was strength to say that I wanted to die. That took strength. And to be with that, and to be with my despair, that took strength.
Yeah. And courage.
And then it took strength to carry on. So there was, my face is even getting red as I'm talking about this, because um, it's like I relive some of this as I talk about it.
Yeah.
I never knew I had that kind of strength.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that strength was not a pissed off strength. It wasn't a I'm going to fight strength. It was just like, it was like a steadiness. It was you will do this. And yes, you have no idea. You have no idea what the end is. And I stopped asking. Like in the beginning, I was asking, like, am I going to walk again? I stopped asking. Because you know what? There were no answers. There were no answers. And there was no guidance. There was nobody outside of me that could answer any of what I needed to know. And so I stopped asking, and I went one day to the next day to the next day with you will, you will, you will. And then so the first 2 years were like that. So it's been 8 years since my surgery. The first 2 years were like that. And then the medical community follows people like me for 2 years, and then there's really not any data for them to fall back on. So my doctor really couldn't say to me after 2 years, he couldn't really tell me anything because there was no data. Do you know what I mean, Michael? There's
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So I
yeah.
remember the day that I went in there and I said to him, my burning pain is in my lower legs. I remember saying to him, is this going to get better? And I was on 6 meds. And he said to me, it's been 2 years. It is what it is.
Wow.
And of course, my first reaction was to cry.
Mhm.
And then my second was, this can't be.
Mm,
This can't be.
mm,
It took me a little while to come to terms with it. But what started happening for me was that, and it's not like I went on the internet and I started searching for other answers. I didn't. What happened is things came my way, which is, it brings tears to my eyes. It's
mm,
absolutely incredible to me
mm,
that, and I call it follow the breadcrumbs. A myofascial expert came came to me
mm,
through a therapy that I had begun to try.
mm.
I went to him. He helped me. He led me to another therapist. Really think I'm almost done with you, Susan. I think that you should go see Matthew Newell. I'm gonna go see Matthew Newell. Did I check in with anybody else? Nope, didn't. Went to see Matthew Newell.
Mm.
Matthew Newell started to do some therapies with me. He says to me, I really think you should see this guy. I think he's a missing piece to your puzzle. Said it to me once, said it to me twice. I ignored. Third time he says it to me, I go, you know what? You better call this guy.
Mm,
He's my shaman. A 6 has a shaman.
mm. Wow.
Really? He's my shaman. He
Mm,
has helped me tremendously. And the
mm,
very interesting thing about that is I was going through the master class a couple months before I started to see him. I can't tell you the name of the woman who laid her hands on me from, I believe she was from Singapore. She was curious about what happened to me. And I remember she put her hands on me and for a couple minutes, and she opened her eyes and she said to me, you need to see a shaman. And I said, what's a shaman? Right. And she said, oh, well, if you were with me, I don't know how to tell you to find a shaman in the United States. And so I was just like, I didn't go searching for a shaman. 3 months later, a shaman comes into my life.
Amazing. Mm,
None of the things that I have done, I have not grasped for any of them. And I'm going to tell you that every single therapy that I have followed since that 2 year mark has gotten me better and better and better and better.
amazing.
And I have not asked anybody
Wow.
what they think about it.
Wow. Very powerful.
So I just had, it's just like, I think I'm done with this now. Yeah, maybe Dr. Gillespie said, you're almost done, Susan. But I think I'm done with this now.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to follow that.
Yeah.
Oh, this guy comes along or this woman came along. I remember the first person that I allowed to touch my body. I wouldn't let anybody touch my body after the surgery,
Mm,
except for clinically. I was
mhm,
terrified.
mm,
And a friend of mine met this therapist And she said, after she talked to her, she said, I think you could help my friend Susan. And I called her, and I can't even tell you why I went to her.
Mm.
I just knew it was right.
Amazing.
She's the first person I let touch my body.
Mm.
And she worked on my body for a good 3 years
Wow.
through spasms and everything,
Mm.
literally restructuring my muscles.
Amazing.
And still to this day, I will say to Elizabeth, I didn't let anybody touch my body until you, and I didn't even know you.
Mm.
I just knew that she was right.
Wow.
So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Well, yeah, it does. Um, so just the impressions sort of coming up in me is that it was like there was some kind of inner knowing that that you didn't get caught going back and forth, yes, no, yes, no. There's just something like, here's the next thing, and something lined up. I mean, this is all my theory, but something lined up around that sort of deep inner knowing that was also, in harmony with a kind of determination, which is, I will not stop. I must get through this. I must find my way out of this, which is kind of like, in some ways, is reminds me of the spirit of the six, Samwise carrying Frodo through all sorts of, and it's like an unwavering will, commitment. And each time, with the movie, it's like he'd be scared to death and something would come through and he'd make the next step and next step and, and would, so it seems to me that really does reflect sort of, that kind of essential strength and courage of the sixth, because it was beyond anything that you knew
courage.
about or had conjured. It was just like in the core of your being, and
Yes,
uh, and just being, and having that courage and willingness to say, I today I feel like dying. Okay, I mean, that's where I'm at. That's the truth. No bullshit. And even that somehow opening up something. There's something about sitting in that kind of despair and hopelessness that seem to come through and reach you, and it doesn't. Some people it doesn't. They kill themselves or they die. So I'm sure there were times when people said, "Well, what's the gift from this?" It's like, if you ask me that question one more time, I will have to kill you. Uh,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look, surrender. w- There's huge surrender,
mm, mm,
and that took that. And look, I don't know if I fully surrendered. I don't think I really did. But certainly, I untethered a tremendous amount
mm,
into surrender,
mm,
and that took a tremendous amount of courage.
yeah,
And that's what you're talking about, that despair. Surrendering to reality and facing reality,
mm,
and then trying to navigate the balance between accepting reality and resignation.
yeah.
That's a dance that I continue
Hmm.
right now.
Hmm.
Um, so I think some people might hear this and say, "Well, you're in wishful thinking." That's not a six. Six doesn't live in wishful thinking.
Yeah.
If anything, I would be living on the glass half empty side,
Yes.
and the amazing uncovering for me is I don't have to live in the glass half empty side.
Mm,
I can live in maybe the glass half full side and still accept reality
mm,
and still feel despair and still have bad days and
mm,
um, still hear, well, probably, you're probably never going to run again. Yeah, okay. I can hear that.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
you might not be able to hold a baby again safely and walk around.
Mhm.
Hard one for me to hear, but it's reality.
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean that I'm in the glass half empty side.
Mhm.
I still have hope.
Mhm. Beautiful. Yeah.
And I'm still following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, I think it's the Hansel and Gretel story that often we talk about following the breadcrumbs, and also it reminds me of Viktor Frankl, in Man's Search for Meaning, and the
Yes.
kind of whatever he had, like yourself, that's like it's like, almost like a power from beyond comes through. There's no words for it. I can't identify it on a personality level, but I'm still breathing and I just made a little more progress. How would that happen in the crucible of, I think I want to die today? And, having that sort of pick up. And, today, I mean, I saw some pictures, I think, of your daughter who got married recently. And you
And
just,
my son.
oh, just beautiful radiance of yourself with them and just what beautiful, beautiful kids, just beautiful kids, and just I mean, just hmm,
Yeah. Look, I still fall into my personality patterns all the time. And if I get a negative mammogram, if I get called back on a mammogram or something, I go totally down the
hmm,
chute. I'm telling you.
hmm,
Um, so uh, it's not like I've overcome that.
hmm,
I really haven't. Um, I just I really do identify with what Russ says. When the going gets tough, man, you can count on a six.
yeah,
And for me, I just never knew that I had this strength.
yeah, yeah,
I just didn't know it. And look, I still have amnesia of it. I
mm,
can still I can still like go out and disagree. Somebody could disagree with me, and I can still go into my head and go, "Oh, they don't like me."
mhm,
How crazy is that, right?
mm. Well,
Like,
there's no,
or I can still question, "Oh, I'm going to do this interview with Michael. Am I going to be good enough?"
mhm, mhm.
Before I got on here, I was like, "Well, I hope I don't screw this up." I- it's kind
well,
of crazy.
well,
Yeah,
there's no getting rid of the patterns. It's in my experience, they show up regardless. They just show up. Uh, a little voice pops up on the stage of my mind, and am I a fraud? Oh, they're gonna think I'm a fraud. I shouldn't even show up and do interviews because they'll see what a fool I am, right? I mean, that whole inner critic thing. But it sounds like in that I can feel it's like there's a level of confidence that you have gained from that. That it isn't always there at your disposal, but it seems that like something really has built in on a deeper level, in a sense, almost filled out your soul that you didn't know you had that capacity, or that you could even be a vessel for it, right? And then
it's
there,
great.
there it was.
It's a great way to put it. To be a vessel for it.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I have a backbone that
yep.
I I had no idea that I had this backbone, and mm, I don't know. Uh, I'm a student of the Diamond Heart now,
Hmm.
the Diamond Approach, and some of my work, I have been able to sense into this mm, inexplainable felt sense that I can handle what comes.
Mm.
It's not a head thing.
Yeah. Mm.
It's not a head thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can't even stay in that felt sense for that long
Mhm.
because it's overwhelming.
Mhm. Mm.
But 10 years ago, would I have been able to? I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know if I would have gotten here without what I've been through.
Well, I've always said that I've been dragged kicking and screaming to the altar of my freedom and growth. I did not, I'm not volunteering for this, but the tide is taking me there, whether I like it or not. So I can, so who knows? I mean, that what that is all about, but it surely seems very important for your own spiritual growth. So I just want to just really honor, your authenticity and just telling the truth of this and really, uh, you know, given the bare bones, like it sucked. It was no joyride, and then there was progress, and then there's liberation, more freedom, and is it as great as it could be? No, but I'm still plugging away. I'm going, I'm carrying the ring to Mordor. We're going to make it there.
I
Come
am.
on, Frodo, I'm carrying you, even though you're not a willing participant. So, yeah. So, within that, like, it sounds like there was a time when sort of catastrophic thinking kind of disappeared and you just got present with each day. Like, I'm not even going to go and I just got this day, got to get through it. Um, were you doing any particular sensing practices or anything like that? Did you have energy for any of that?
Absolutely not.
Yeah,
I was not.
yeah.
The last thing that I wanted to do was sense in first of all, the last thing I wanted to do was sense into my body. And you can recall that
Hmm.
when you and I did some work together,
Hmm.
I was I was like, how can I sense into my body when I'm in so much pain?
So, yeah, absolutely.
And I had master coaches say to me, go into the pain, see if you can go into the pain.
Yeah,
I'm not going to curse, but no way.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, I did not have the skill, the willingness, the ability to go into my pain. So it took me a really, really long time. I literally can remember leaving a Diamond Heart retreat because I just couldn't bear the pain. And I was just like, I can't be here anymore. I can't sense into anything anymore.
Hmm.
So um I don't know if that was healthy or not, Michael, but I
Well,
had support. I had coaching support.
yeah. Well, in my way of thinking, you couldn't get away from your body. It was all you were always sensing it. It was pain.
Always.
So it wasn't
Never a
like,
minute.
yeah, you were doing the practice 24/7, and which adding to it some other deepening was not necessary. You in my but it's like you were not losing contact with the idea. I have a body here. What do we do with sensing? It's to help me remember I have a body. And your pain was just like pulling you there. It's like you have a body and it hurts and it's unmerciful at this point. But that was a meditation in and of itself.
Well, here's a really interesting thing that I've thought about too is the situation that I ended up in, it literally exacerbated my hypervigilance.
Oh, interesting.
So think about that, right? So I even still today, I have to think about what I'm doing. And I have to, before I walk across the street, I have to make sure that I'm balanced and that it's not like if a car starts to come that I can run across the street. So I literally have been put into a situation
Hmm.
where I don't know, I have to find a healthy vigilance.
Yeah. Yeah.
A-
It's a
and
must.
I was already hyper vigilant. Jesus, right? And then you take all this away from me and like think about how many things I can be scared of now.
Yeah.
I I can be scared to walk around Giant because it's too big or Costco.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to face that every day.
Yeah. And you're not imagining. I mean, it's like real stuff, right?
It's real.
It's
It's
not
real.
imagine.
It's not
Yeah.
in my mind. It's
Yeah.
real.
It's
So
real.
so the interesting thing is I notice when it's this going crazy
Yeah.
versus it being like this makes sense, Susan. Like you better not step off that curb. Right.
Yeah.
This makes a whole hell of a lot of sense. So I've just thought about that so much. Like of all the types to put into this situation, you put a 6 in here.
Yeah.
Think how much more crazy, anxious I could have gotten.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so it's like that's now a tool that you can use to help yourself avoid real dangers. Like I gotta be awake, which is, and it's interesting. You notice when it's just sort of the confabulation of the head center, and when it's like that curve is real. I could fall.
Well, some of the therapy that I've done, and this is very important, and it has helped me more than anything, is to balance my nervous system.
Mm.
So, one of the most impactful therapies that I've done is something called Cereset.
Mm.
And it takes my brain waves and translates them into sound waves. And then my brain hears itself.
Mm. Interesting.
Sound waves, my brain hears itself. So, the and I'm not an expert in this, but what I can say is that over the 2 years that I've been doing this, we've seen my brain go from fight to freeze to flight to fight to freeze to flight, and eventually come into way more of a normal continuum.
Mm. Wow.
So that my nervous system is much more settled
Mm.
than um, probably than any time in my life,
Mm.
even though my nerves are so hypersensitive
Mm.
on
Interesting.
my limbs.
Interesting. Interesting.
So mm, I would say that that's a therapy that everybody should do.
Yeah.
Everyone.
And so spell that word out again.
It's like cerebellum, Cereset,
Somerset.
Cereset,
Okay.
Cereset.
Yeah. Well,
And of course, medical community, God bless them, but no double blind placebo controlled studies on this. And if I told you the story about how I came upon this, it would blow your mind, right? It was literally a follow the breadcrumbs.
well, well, well. So, just curious if any, you've given us, such depth and breadth around your own journey. When you think about helping other sixes, is there anything that feels like you would like to impart? You've already imparted a lot, but I'm just wondering if anything comes up for you.
Um, the strength of your arms and the courage of your shoulders is far more than you could ever imagine.
Beautiful.
and trust that.
mm,
Listen,
mm,
listen,
mm,
listen, not just to yourself, but listen to the messages that I believe the universe puts out there for us.
mm,
And maybe you can't take a big step towards that message, but maybe even if you just take the littlest step,
mm, mm,
the littlest step,
mm,
and you'll gain more and more insight into the tremendous power that's inside of us.
mm, mm.
And whether, it depends on what you believe, whether, you're connected to God or you are God, right?
Mhm, mhm,
But there is no doubt in my mind that I am guided. There's no doubt.
beautiful.
I am blessed and I am guided.
Mm,
And
beautiful.
my job
Mm,
is to try to stay open
mm,
and listen.
mm. Yeah, beautiful. Mm, mm, mm. Well,
Thank you.
yeah, I want to just thank you and just send you lots of love and such a appreciation for your beautiful soul and your journey. And I'm so happy that there's, you're have gone through and sort of come out of the hellacious purgatory that you were in for a bit of time, and just such such a blessing. So yeah, just want to thank you, and
Thank you.
yeah,
Thanks
just
for listening.
absolutely my pleasure. So I'm gonna